Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you who are in Europe and the United Kingdom, and good afternoon to all those in India. This is Professor K.C. Janardhan, one of the Vice Chairs of Europe India Center for Business and Industry, as well as your Master of Ceremonies for this program. I have great pleasure in welcoming the delegates from European Union, India, and the United Kingdom to the summit on cultural relationships as key driver for stronger trade and investment partnerships between India and United Kingdom, as well as European Union. This is our fourth mini summit of Europe India 40 VIEWS campaign. I now call upon Sujit Nair, the chairperson of Europe India Center for Business.
Yeah, I think we just lost last slide. That's fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Janardhan. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, distinguished guests, members of Parliament, panel speakers, and delegates. As Mr. Janardhan mentioned, my name is Sujit Nair, and I'm the chairman of Europe India Center for Business and Industry. We are a multilateral trade body, and in association with various partner organizations, over the past few years, we have been playing a key role in promoting closer trade and relations in the India, UK, EU tri-corridor over the past 10 years. As part of our activities, initiatives, we have organized 24 major summits in Europe, 22 summits at the British Parliament in London, 2 summits at the European Parliament in Brussels, whereby EICBI and its delivery partners have engaged more than 3,240 delegates from 2,190 companies. These summits have provided an opportunity for British MPs, European MEPs, and Indian lawmakers to not only get to know each other, but also engage in discussions which companies are planning to expand into these regions. We have organized numerous delegation visits to India, which have provided opportunities for MPs and companies to get a first-hand experience of Indian markets. Now, we release an annual listing of top 40 under 40 leaders called EuropeIndia40, and this listing includes leaders below the age of 40 from the UK-India corridor and EU-India corridor, and are doing great work in promoting EU-India relations and UK-India relations. As per the initiative to promote the works of EuropeIndia40 Leaders, we are currently carrying out a campaign called EuropeIndia40 VIEWS, hear from the leaders who will shape the future of UK-India, EU-India relations. And this summit is the last of this campaign for this year. As part of this campaign, we have been organizing a series of virtual summits since January, which focus on various topics which EuropeIndia40 leaders are passionate about, so as to share their message and work to a wider audience. We had the first summit on 22nd January, and this focused on the impact of Brexit on UK, India, and EU-India relations. In addition to the participation of 4 of our EuropeIndia40 leaders, we had current leaders from British Parliament, European Parliament, and Indian Parliament who participated in the summit. From the UK Parliament, we had Lord Moylan. From the European Parliament, we had Ms. Asa Podnik. From the Indian Parliament, we had Ms. Priyanka Chaturvedi. And from the Indian Parliament, we also had Mr. Achyuta Samantha, who had participated in that discussion. On 26 January was the second mini summit, and this was on green economy and climate change cooperation between India and the European Union, and India and the UK. So in addition to our EuropeIndia40 leaders, we had Dr. Kirit Solanki from Indian Parliament, Ms. Wenjahan from European Parliament, and Mr. Robert Whittemore from UK Parliament. The third summit of our EuropeIndia40 VIEWS campaign focused on strengthening business cooperation between India and UK and India and EU. In addition to the participation of 8 of our EuropeIndia40 leaders in the panel discussion, 4 members from the European Parliament, we had Mr. Soren Gale. From the UK Parliament, we had Sir Ian Duncan Smith and Lord Rami Ranger. And from the Indian Parliament, we had Dr. Kesha Rao, who had participated in the discussion. For the summit on how cultural relationship can be a key driver for promoting stronger trade and relations between India and the UK as well as the EU. In addition to our EuropeIndia40 leaders, I'm glad to have Mr. Sandro Gossi from the European Parliament, who's online with us now. We have Mr. Antony from Indian Parliament, and we have Lord Hannon from the UK Parliament, who's also online with us now, sharing their thoughts. We are recording this session for future reference, and we'll also be sharing this live on our Facebook page. Without much ado, I request my colleague, Mr. Janardhan, to now take forward discussion and invite Mr. Gossi and followed by Lord Hannon for the discussion.
Thank you, Sujit, for that wonderful overview of the program. I now invite our events chair, Abhishek Tripathi, to introduce the member of the European Parliament, Sandro Gozzi.
Hello, everyone. I'm Abhishek Tripathi, Vice Chair Events for Europe India Center for Business Industry, an entrepreneur and director for Abiflow Rhythm. It is my privilege to welcome Mr. Sandro Gozzi, who has an impressive record in the field of international politics and diplomacy. Mr. Gozzi has an illustrious career of over 3 decades in international politics. He is currently serving as member of European Parliament for France for Renew Europe Group and is focused in creating truly transnational Europe. He has served as a former Undersecretary for European Affairs of the Italian government. Mr. Gozzi has authored various publications on European issues in 7 languages. He holds a PhD in public law from University of Bologna and has been teaching in several European and American institutions. He teaches European Union institution and policies at Institut d'études politiques of Paris and the European College of Bruges and Parma, to name a few. Mr. Gozzi is a great friend of India. He is a member of EU delegation for relationship with India for European Parliament and is a president of EU-India Association. Thanks to his extensive efforts and experience, India and EU have a more strengthened bond and are coming ever closer. I will welcome Mr. Sandro Gozzi to speak. Monsieur Gozzi, merci d'être là avec nous aujourd'hui.
Merci. Did you hear me well?
Yes, we.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm really very glad to be with you. I'm talking to you from a very nice part of Europe, which is Valencia in Spain, because I'm here for the Congress of the European Federalists. And I didn't want anyhow to miss this occasion to address myself to you, mainly and mostly, as you rightly said, as a good friend of India. I strongly believe in India. I strongly believe in Indian people. And I'm a great admirer of Indian culture and also of Indian federalism. These are the main reason, and not the only one, for which I'm very glad to address to you today. The other reason is that I think we are entering into a new phase for the relationship between India and Europe, between the Indian Union and the European Union. But we have to seize this opportunity because our interests have never been so close. The potential political, economic, and geopolitical convergences have never been so important. I do believe that we have lived a very important moment of our bilateral relationship recently in Portugal with the summit, with the Visio summit between the president of the council, the Portuguese president of the council, Antonio Costa, and the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. There, we have really indicated new common goals. The fact that we have started to talk again seriously about the possible trade agreement between India and Europe, the fact that we are talking about an investment protection agreement, the fact that we have identified the common challenges such as the fight against climate change, the fact that we want to invest more together on the digital transformation. These are all exceptional points of convergence between India and Europe that we have to fully exploit. And also there is another dimension. Europe wants to play a more assertive role on the international scene. If we want to do so, we have to have very clear who are our allies, who are our friends, who are our competitors, and where the threats come. And if you look at the Indo-Pacific region, and if you look at the Asian development, I don't have any doubt in pointing out India as an ally and a friend of Europe, and China as a competitor and today a potential threat for the stability at world level. I don't want to put in opposition one and the others. I just say that, of course, in international relations, we have to promote demanding dialogue with all the actors, but we have to also be very clear where our friends stand. And from my perspective, it is clear that also geopolitically, there is a strong common interest between New Delhi and Brussels and the European capitals. These are all the reasons why I think that it is a perfect moment to double our efforts for our bilateral relationship. And this is why I thank you very much for your endeavor, for your initiatives. And of course, you can always count on me to promote our common project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Godse, for your wonderful speech to promote better cultural relationships. And thanks for having joined us.
I think we just lost Casey. Shall I? Casey, are you back?
We request you to just after there. I am very much there. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yes. I was just thanking Mr. Godse for having joined us and for a wonderful speech on the bilateral relationships and the promotion of wonderful cultural relationships between the two countries and the European Union. I was requesting Mr. Godse that if he could stay back for some time with us after the other two MPs would complete their address for a question and answer session. Thank you so much. Now, I request our Vice Chair, Councillor Arian Arete, the Councillor of Kensington and Chelsea, to introduce the Member of House of Lords, UK Parliament, Lord Hannan.
Thank you, Casey. And firstly, thank you everyone for joining us. Good morning from UK. And namaste, Lord Hannan. Amazing outfit. I must say that you've probably dominated any speaker since we started our summit. You've got the best outfit, and thank you for respecting our culture. I must say, if there's an award that needs to be given, I mean, it will be your outfit. Thank you very much. Firstly, it's a pleasure and privilege to invite you, Daniel Hannan, Lord Hannan of Kingsclear. May I, on behalf of Europe India Centre for Business and Industry, congratulate you on becoming Life Peer at House of Lords, and thank you for joining us. To all the members and delegates, there's a lot to say about Lord Hannan, but I'm just keeping it very brief, very precise. Daniel Hannan, Lord Hannan of Kingsclear, is an author and a columnist. He serves on the UK Board of Trade and is a vice chair of the Conservative Party responsible for its international relations. He teaches at the University of Buckingham and the University of Francisco Marroquin in Guatemala. He has written 9 books, including Sunday Times bestseller, How We Invented Freedom. He sat as a Conservative MEP for 21 years and was the founder of Vote Leave campaign. He writes regular columns for, among others, the Sunday Telegraph, the Washington Examiner, and the Conservative Hope. There's a lot to say about Lord Hannan. As I said, I just kept it very brief. He was one of the youngest members of European Parliament for Southeast of England when he was elected in 1999. It's definitely an inspiring to most of our delegates, who are some of whom are politicians, entrepreneurs working for India-UK, Europe-UK relations. And thank you for coming, sir. And the stage is yours. We look forward to your message. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Arian. Thank you, Casey. Thank you, all of you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And congratulations to the EICBI for holding this summit on this issue. The way you framed it as opportunities for UK-India trade and for EU-India trade is exactly right. It's worth reminding ourselves that free trade is one of those things that enriches everybody. There are no losers. It shouldn't be competitive, right? It's not as though there is a race between Brussels and London as to who can be first. As a British politician and a member of the UK Board of Trade, I really hope that India, as well as having a comprehensive and ambitious free trade agreement with us, also has a very deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with the EU. Why? Well, because it helps everybody. We want to have rich neighbors, right? We want the EU to succeed. We recognize that having them as rich neighbors will make them better customers, even if they were not already our friends and allies in the first place. So to the extent that an EU-India free trade agreement enriches both parties, it helps us both ways as a trading partner with both. So please, let's remember that free trade is not mercantilist, it's not competitive, it's not an instrument of foreign policy. It is a way of removing barriers between customers and businesses so that everybody becomes better off. Now, I think we have peculiar opportunities, unique opportunities at this moment. It happens that just as India is beginning seriously to rethink its global trade policy, the UK is taking back control of its own trade policy. Of course, when we were in the European Union, all of our commerce was decided for us by the European Commission. The EU is a customs union, not a free trade area. So a condition of membership is that you have no trade policy. All of that is done collectively for you. So this is a very unusual moment, an unfrozen moment. How often is it that a big G7 country gets to draw up a trade policy from scratch? Now, to put in a little bit of background, we've had to prioritize, right? After 50 years putting together a trade policy for the first time, we have bandwidth issues. We have limits on how much we can do at one time. So we've taken the view that where we inherit a perfectly serviceable deal from the EU with South Korea or Mexico or whatever, we basically just roll that over. We say, guys, we'll come back to this, but for now, if you're happy, we're happy. Let's just leave that as it is. And we've focused on what we regard as the biggest priorities, which are English-speaking common law countries which have a kind of regulatory interoperability with us. Australia, New Zealand, the US, and of course the biggest prize, which is a UK-India free trade agreement. Now, why UK and India? What's special? Well, to make a very obvious point, look at what we're doing now, right? Over the last 18 months, we've all become much more used to having conversations like this, even important, sensitive commercial conversations. Those of you on this Zoom call who are businessmen, first of all, thank you. Actually, I always feel politicians should say thank you to the businessmen because you generate all the revenue that we need for everything. But you will all know that you're much readier now to have serious transactions online in a way that we wouldn't really have done without face-to-face meetings in 2019. And a result of that is that geographical proximity matters less than it did, and cultural proximity matters more. Now, there are 1.5 million Brits of Indian origin. If there is any country that is a natural fit as India begins to trade more widely, it's this one. You know, there's a convention that every politician talking about every diaspora community says, oh, they're very enterprising people, right? For once, that doesn't need saying. It's not just that our British Indian population is unusually entrepreneurial. It's that actually, if you look at the top 10 richest people in the UK, a great many of them are Indian nationals, right? So I don't need to kind of labor that point. But that, of course, does create natural networks, pre-existing networks based on mutuality of similar legal system. If two companies have a dispute, it'll be arbitrated in a way that they both understand. Obviously, for business purposes, India is effectively an Anglophone country and, as our last speaker correctly said, an ally and a democracy, an exporter of democratic values in the region. So for all of those reasons, I think that the moment is here. I'll say one more thing, and you know, all my political career, I've not shied away from saying sensitive things. So let me put it like this. After independence, India went down the road of protectionism for a long time, for a lot longer than other countries did. And for understandable reasons, but with a lot of negative consequences. It was really only at the end of the 20th century that India properly began to open up. Why? Well, all of the Indians watching will know this, but let me say it for the British and European participants. Think of it like that. The blue wheel in the middle of the Indian flag, the chakra, you can see it very clearly, its origins. If you look at the old Congress Party flag, it's a handloom. Right? A very big part of Gandhi's movement was the idea that we should, or that India should replace textiles from Lancashire with homespun, hand-produced cotton. Now, to put this as neutrally as I can, that is not the way a country gets rich. Producing stuff very slowly and expensively, when you can buy it much more cheaply, is very rarely a route to prosperity. And these days, of course, it's the other way around, right? Gandhi would be astonished to learn that it's now actually Indian textiles that are suffering from tariffs when they are exported to Europe or to the UK, 9.5%, for example, on men's shirts. India, of course, still has tariffs in other areas. For example, there's a 150% tariff on Scotch whiskey. Removing all of those tariffs, having a zero tariff, zero quota policy will hugely enrich both our countries. And it's the right thing to do morally. There is a basic premise that I hope all of you in business will recognize, that if you want to sell me something and I want to buy it from you, there should be a really good reason before the government comes between us and lays down conditions or declares our transaction illegal. And the fact that we are in different countries is not a good reason. So we should be doing this partly because it will make us richer, partly because free trade is morally right and is a way of spreading poverty alleviation and conflict resolution. One more point. The tariff removal, I hope, is easy. I want this to be a cutting-edge agreement. India has FTAs with ASEAN, with Japan, great. We can go better. We should aim higher than that. We should look to have a deal that fundamentally says that whatever is legal in one country should be legal in the other, and that this should apply to goods, to services, and to professional qualifications. This should be a deal that deals with data flows, with digital, with investor protection mechanisms, all the most cutting edge and ambitious parts of trade policy. Britain and India can set a global standard, and one that I hope other Commonwealth countries will then get involved with. Part of that, I hope, will be freer movement of labor. I don't say free movement of people. You know, I'm talking about the right to take up a job in the other country. When I stopped being a member of the European Parliament, I started working for JCB, the people who make the diggers, right? Now, we think of JCB in Britain as the quintessential British company, right? And I'm always amused when I talk to Indian friends who say, well, actually, yeah, but we kind of think of it as a sort of Indian company. I mean, on one level, we know that it was invented in Britain, but it's kind of like cricket. It was accidentally invented in Britain, but it's fundamentally now an Indian institution. JCB, which employs, what, 24,000 people in the UK and India, 2 years ago, was allowed 17 work permits to bring skilled, qualified Indian staff from its Pune base to its base in the West Midlands, right? You can't compete as a serious international company with those kinds of restrictions on free movement of labor. Now, the dispute up until now, let's acknowledge this, is that the Indian government has been demanding more access for visas, and the UK government has been saying, well, yeah, but India needs to do more to take back illegal migrants. Guys, come on. If there isn't the basis of a deal there, then politicians and diplomats are really bad at what they do. There is surely the makings of a mutually beneficial accord there that makes it easier for Indians to work legally in the UK, but harder for people to travel illegally. We must be able to agree something like that. And I hope that a UK-India deal encompassing freer movement will be not just an economic boon, but will revitalize and give a new impetus to the alliance of democracies. Boris Johnson has been working very hard to turn the G7 into a D10 with India, Australia, and South Korea, D for democracies, right? We have values in common, good values, that elevate the rules above the rulers, that elevate the individual above the collective, that keep the army out of politics, that allow people to change their governments peacefully. Those are not universal values in India's immediate vicinity. So as well as making ourselves much better off, I hope that we will end up closer friends and closer allies than ever before.
Well, thank you, Namaste, Lord Hannan. That's a very inspiring speech. Some of the points you just mentioned are probably the burning issues for India and UK trade relations. I believe someone has a question. Is it Costa? Costa, are you there?
Uday, we can have one more MP speak, and then we'll have the questions for all the MPs together.
Sure, no problem. Thank you, Lord Hannan. I'm sure you can wait for a few minutes. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Aryan, for doing the honors. I must compliment Lord Hannan that he's already wearing the Indian attire, therefore the cultural relationship is forged. You made some very valid points about free trade, about not competing with the other countries in Europe, but then collaborating for a better world. You brought in a lot of interesting points, which I think will be taken seriously for a better relationship between India and Britain and the European Union. Wonderful speech. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you will be with us until the next MP from India finishes his speech. And after that, we will have the question and answer session. Thank you so much. I now have pleasure in inviting the Indian MP, Mr. Anto Antony. Mr. Antony, you're muted. I would want you to unmute. Yes, I have great pleasure in introducing the Member of Parliament from India, Mr. Anto Antony, who hails from what is called as the God's own country, which is called Kerala in India. He has been an MP since 2009, representing the Indian National Congress Party. Currently, he is a Member of Parliament Standing Committee on Tourism, Transportation and Culture in India. His other interests include education, environment and rural development. I could go on speaking about him, but because of paucity of time, I would request him now to address the summit on cultural relations as key driver for stronger trade and investment partnerships between India and United Kingdom, as well as the European Union. Over to Mr. Antony.
Good afternoon to my friends in India, and a good morning to my dear friends in the UK. I am extremely happy to be a part of this summit organized by EuropeIndia Center for Business and Industry with such an esteemed and well-represented panel. The subject of this summit is cultural relationships as a key driver for stronger trade and investment partnerships between India, UK, and the European Union. This is the fourth summit on this series. The three summits organized before this were on green economy and climate change, impact of Brexit, strengthening business cooperation between India, UK, and European Union. These summits have proved to serve as a platform for detailed analysis and discussion on the themes mentioned. And it gives me immense joy that these discussions have inspired a vast majority of people around the world through practical discussions on economic growth, business development, and environmental protection. This past summit helped create a cooperative dialogue between our countries on a wide range of issues by bringing forth a range of perspectives from well-represented panels. India's heritage is one of the oldest in the world. Indian culture gave birth to many visions and perspectives that became a model to the whole world. In India's journey from the ancient to the modern, the foundation for many ideals that spread light to the world was formed in this country. Buddhism, an ideal enrooted in non-violence, founded by Sri Gautama Buddha, arose from India. Britain, the country that ruled the world and the greatest military power at the time, was subdued by India, not by weapons, but by its virtuous power, thus fulfilling the nation's dreams for independence under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi. By transforming itself into a nation that is deeply rooted in non-violence, India played a major role in making non-violence the greatest perspective shift in the world. Normally, a nation's formation and development is confined to caste, religion, language, or culture, whereas India houses hundreds of caste, religion, language, and culture. We are proud to be the most diverse in the world. The nation continues to grow and spread across an economic power, stands strong holding to the rich cultural heritage even after decades because of enrooted principles and ideas that knit people together on the basis of humanity. India is a parliamentary democratic republic. The values of British democracy had a crucial influence in the progressive evolution of Indian democracy. I am speaking to you today from Kerala, located in the southern part of India. The state of Kerala has had trade relations with the Western world since 3000 BC. Traders from many countries in Europe and Middle East came in search of the distinctive spices in Kerala. Because of its geographic positioning near the Arabian Sea, the people of Kerala got opportunities to connect with the people from different countries and various cultures. The transformation of Kerala into a culmination of many cultures had its beginning through these connections. It was a time where the Muslims, Christians, Jews, and Hindus, the native of the land, lived together peacefully. As we reach 2021, the idea of the need to improve economic and business relationships on the basis of cultural ties has grown stronger than ever before. We can say that it has a strong backing in history because India is a nation with a glorious heritage. It was from Europe that letters and knowledge spread across the world. English, the language of the world, was taught to India by the Christian missionaries who came to India. This in turn has paved way for the younger generation of the nation to become one of the most powerful and vibrant in the world. Our nation is to 1/5 of the world's population, of which 50 to 60% of them are youth and children. By the knowledge they acquire by their understanding of the yesteryear's cultural heritage, they should be able to envision their relations with the world with a broader perspective. Only if they know about the yesterdays, they will have a clear understanding of today, and they will be able to continue their journey with a focus on the destination. To know the yesteryears, to know from the yesteryears, our youth should be imbibe the realities of our culture, of our land. Hence, we can be assured that the cultural interaction between different communities will serve as a platform for the progress of the nation and welfare of the society. Europe has many distinguishing ideals. Similarly, India also has great ideals, starting from those of the ancient to the modern ones. And there is no denying of the fact that the collaboration of this will come to fruition through cultural exchange. This is the reason this cultural exchange will serve as a key driver to the industries and progress. I hope and pray let such discussions help us to progress together in that direction. I thank you once again for having me here today and pray that each of you and your loved ones are keeping safe from the pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony. That was a very enriching speech, giving us a holistic view of this nation and how culture plays a very important role in developing the basic relationships and then taking it further into business. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. And there would be some questions from the delegates and the other participants. If somebody wants to ask any questions, you could be very clear to whom the question is addressed, and then the question will be taken and answered. Maybe we have 10 minutes for question and answers.
Yeah, I believe, Casey, there's a question to Lord Hannan from Madhu. Nandan, Madhu,
Yes.
do you want me to speak, or are you happy?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, Madhu, hi.
Yes, I can speak. Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Yeah, my name is Madhu Nandan. So when Mr. Lord Hannan mentioned that some of the aspects regarding this free trade agreement is validity of laws that are applicable in UK, in India as well. So my question was regarding the IT laws and the data protection laws, which are much behind in India compared to the UK. So how would this be addressed?
Yes, thank you. I mean, this is where trade is now. You know, people think that trade deals are still about steel quotas or, you know, agricultural subsidies. That's what takes up 90% of the argument, but it's a tiny fraction of the economy. A much, much bigger question is the one that you've just raised, Madhu. How do you allow companies to operate, data companies to operate across each other's territories? Now, as a broad rule of thumb, the European Union has got much more emphasis on privacy and on data protection. They passed the GDPR rule, which has imposed obligations on everyone who keeps data. We as a country, on leaving the European Union, have to decide the extent to which we want to keep what we had, in this as in other fields. And I think the view is that on balance, we would rather have a more liberal system, and that will make it much easier for us to have mutual recognition agreements with pretty much everyone else, with Australia, with Singapore, with Japan, with the United States, and I hope with India. And I think we will end up, we're in sort of fairly early days here, but I think we will end up evolving towards a global standard, that you won't need prescriptive laws on this, but that if companies, it's a bit like patenting or whatever, if companies want to operate, they will begin automatically to adopt a standard that is recognized overseas and that allows them to operate elsewhere. And I hope that will be a more liberal one than the regime that we have in the European Union. I think that put far too much, it was like an attempt to control the internet, which I think is doomed. You know, the reality is that we have this explosion of opportunity, and sensible data is one that protects intellectual property and allows free transactions, but that doesn't seek state control. And I think that will be the basis of a UK-India trade deal.
Thank you, Lord Hannan. We've got Mr. Cow. Would you want to read out, or can I go ahead and read out? Mr. Cow? All right, let me read that out. So the question is, what are the opportunities for Indian IT companies for business and strategic partnership in healthcare, specifically in the UK?
They're huge, you know, and already a lot of that is happening. One of the incredible advantages that India has is economies of scale. I remember reading a while ago, I think it was in Hyderabad, but I forget, there was this groundbreaking eye hospital, eye surgery. And because India is very big, and because the population is very large, and the number of people who needed these operations was therefore much higher, they only did that. They specialized in this one operation. And they were so specialized that in each surgery, there was a swivel chair, right? So that as the surgeon was operating on one side, the other patient was being brought in to be ready. That was how quick it was. And of course, the result of this is that the price fell to about a 50th of what it is, and also that the results were better, right? If you needed eye surgery, would you rather go to someone who does it twice a year, or would you rather go to somebody who does it, 20 times a day, right? So I think the opportunities here for effectively for the UK to be buying in services from India, it will be cheaper for us in some areas to send people en masse for treatment in India and bring them back than to treat them in the UK. But short of that, the capacity, for example, to get CT scans and stuff done, the time difference helps enormously. So you send the data at close of play in the UK, you get it on your desk by the following morning is tremendous. I also want to see there are one of the other extraordinary facts I learned from JCP is that there are more Indian engineering graduates in Pune than in the UK. Right, in 1 year. So I want that talent to be liberated. I want coders in Bangalore and engineers to be able to work more freely here. This is not as a favor to them, as a favor to everyone else, which may also happen incidentally to benefit them. And that's why I think that a big part of this deal should be a more ambitious approach to free movement of labor.
Thank you a lot, Hanan. I think we've got one more last question. It's quite a lengthy one, but if I just squeeze that into short form. What about the heavy industry technology transfer that Britain wants to do an open dialogue with Indian companies seeking a joint venture?
Yeah, well, I hope. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, it's participating government tenders there in the UK for Indian companies and for British companies to do that in India. So it's between the transfer between government projects, basically, like an open dialogue here.
Yeah, I mean, this I suspect is somewhere where the bigger impact will be felt in India. The UK has very liberal rules on allowing people to invest. In fact, we encourage it. We love people coming here and buying companies. And many of the most iconic British brands, as you guys will know, are owned by India now, Tetley Tea, Jaguar cars, whatever. I could spend half an hour running through them, right? India has much more restrictive rules. It's quite difficult for an overseas company to operate in India other than through an Indian partner. And the big losers from that are not the overseas companies, but the Indian consumers. That raises prices, which means that Indian consumers have less to spend on everything else. So there isn't the economic boom that there would be if prices fell because it was easier for foreign companies to offer services directly. And I mean, you mentioned heavy industry, but I think this applies for legal services, financial services, the works. One of the toughest things for people to get about trade is that the big advantage is cheaper imports. Almost all of us instinctively think in kind of mercantilist terms. We think that the big win of trade is being able to sell more stuff to someone else. That's great as well. But the much bigger advantage is being able to buy stuff more cheaply so that you can work shorter hours while sustaining the same living standard, so that you free up all that time to make and sell other things. That's really what drives the economy. And the big win for us is being able to buy, agricultural produce, textiles, the works more cheaply from India. The big win from India will be to lower the price of services by having a more accommodating approach to UK companies.
Thank you a lot, Hanan, and thank you, Mr. GVS Pillai, for that question. I think that's probably the end of it.
I have a question.
I'm sorry we are running late, so I hope you will understand. We thank the time given by the MPs, and we have to move to the panel discussion next. So I would request the others to hold back, and maybe you can type in your questions, and Councillor Aryan could be addressing it later, and then we'll see if there is time. Okay.
Okay. So thank you, Lord Hanan. Thank you very much
guys.
for joining. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Lord. Cheers.
So,
Well,
ladies and
Casey,
gentlemen,
it's all yours. Yeah.
sorry. Yes, thank you, Councillor Aryan. And we now move to the next part of the program, which is our first panel discussion. And this panel discussion will be for around 45 to 50 minutes, and 10 minutes would be for the question and answers. I request all of you to please restrict yourself with a short question to the point, and then let it not exceed that 10 minutes, because we have a second panel discussion coming up. So I have pleasure in inviting the following panelists for this discussion, which is on cultural relationships as key driver for stronger trade and investment partnerships between India and the United Kingdom. We have Mr. Costa Mavroulakis, founder and CEO, Impact Ventures, Mr. Nayan Gala, founder and managing partner, JPIN Venture Catalyst Limited, Mr. Vijay Babu Gurugubelli, he is the director, Lead Process India Private Limited, Mr. Rahul Ithape, founder of UK India Startup Corridor. I request the panelists to be ready for the discussion, and I have pleasure in inviting Mr. Pratik Dattani, MD EPG London, former UK head and FICCI India advisor, Bridge India, to moderate the panel discussion. Over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much for that, and great to see so many people here today, both from India and the UK and elsewhere in Europe as well. Very warm welcome to my panelists, to Costa, Nayan, Vijay Babu and Rahul. Great to see you all again. I think we're running just behind schedule, so as we just heard, we're going to keep it quite tight, and we'll get through some very interesting discussions over the next half an hour or so. Nayan, if I can start with you. The topic is cultural relationships as a key driver for stronger trade and investment relationships between both countries, the UK and India. Let's start with you. And what I wanted to ask is, you're one of the major players in building a corridor between the UK and India in terms of your business. What cultural differences or language barriers do you see that prevents good potential deals from startups get successfully concluded?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Nice to be on this panel. Thank you, Pratik. Good to speak to you. So one of the things that we have observed, as being one of the major investors and building the largest corridor between the UK and India for startup investments, is that a lot of startups which are looking to grow in India, when they are looking to grow into parts of, let's say, South India or Northern India, they do find it slightly challenging in terms of who do they approach and how do they get about going into the space and into the market. And that's where there is a bit of a challenge that they have been facing for a period of time. And this is where we as investors have been coaching and advising them in terms of bringing them to our accelerator in India and supporting them to help them grow in the country, because again, India is so culturally diverse. So it is very important that they can have a strong base in a particular part of the country. They can have a hub and spoke model to grow and expand into other parts of the country. From a cultural differences perspective, again, India is a very relationship-driven model versus in the UK and Europe. The startup ecosystem is quite developed. So the two ecosystems are very different in terms of the way they operate right now, and the way the family offices and the investors operate. So there is in terms of the way we do our due diligence on startups, the data that is available generally, it's very easily available on Companies House to everywhere else in the UK, whereas when you go into India, it becomes slightly challenging. So what we're trying to do is, bringing similar kind of systems both in the UK and India, so that investors as well as entrepreneurs who are looking to do transactions between the two countries, they find it seamless in terms of doing the transactions and growing the businesses.
And what about the investors? Do the investors also, are they very different in both countries in terms of what they look out for, how they engage with their startups? UK investors maybe culturally more hands-on, Indian investors less so. Can you share some insights onto that?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So again, there is a lot of difference. The VC ecosystem in India is still, I would say, at a very early stage. So you can see that the family office culture is still developing, and therefore you will see a lot of new family offices and new institutional investors coming in. There are only a handful of VCs that are operating at a very high level, but other than that, there are a few angel investment networks as well. But compared to where UK is and Europe is, UK and Europe has a lot of investors who are very hands-on and would put in a lot of time and effort into helping the whole ecosystem grow and the startups grow, and are very involved in the way they are investing into the startup, not just the capital, but also time. In India, it is still developing and evolving over a period of time. But this is where, we as a business, as JPI Venture Catalyst, we come in and we facilitate the whole, investment into the startups, and we bring the startup angel investors onto the cap table as well, so that they can understand how to invest into the startups. What are the things that you should be looking for in terms of investing into startup? Because in the UK again, so a lot of these there is data protection, and then there is FCA regulation and everything else. In India, it is all getting there. There is a lot of compliance is coming into place. SEBI is coming in a big way in terms of coming in with startup policies. So a lot of good things are happening in India now. So there's a lot of cultural shift happening as well.
As you said, there's a very developed ecosystem for investing in startups in the UK and in Europe. India is one of many markets that investors here, whether they're angels or whether they're VCs, would be looking at. What is it about Indian startups that attract some of the investors here in your experience? And after this question, I'll come on to Costa. I've got a few questions as a follow-up for him as well.
Yeah. So we have done, one of the things that we are doing as a platform is, showcasing the opportunities between cross-border, between the two countries, or between Europe and Asia as a region. And one of the things that, attracts a lot of investors in UK and Europe into India is that there is a tremendous growth opportunity. There are 620 million odd mobile users now in the country. India is one of the fastest growing unicorn land. So, if you look at the number of unicorns in India now, it's almost close to 100. And, it is one of the biggest startup ecosystem that is happening. After UK, after US and China, the number of unicorns, soon to be unicorns, is the highest in India. So there is tremendous growth that is happening in India, especially in tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 cities, where there is a massive population, as we all know. And what is happening is that a lot of the first round of startups, which were, the Olas of the world and Oyos, they have now gone through the circle of investment, large-scale investments. They have become unicorns. Their teams have been very experienced. They are now coming out, building their own startups. So the startup ecosystem is really growing very fast. And, in terms of valuations of the businesses and how much growth opportunity and potential there is, a lot of investors from UK and Europe are very attracted right now to invest into startups. And just to give you, a data point here, almost 20 plus billion was invested in last year into, into the Indian ecosystem. So there's a lot of investment that is going in the country right now for investing into startups.
20 billion in a year. Those are some pretty significant numbers. Costa, let me come to you. To what extent do you think that technology plays a role in strengthening these cultural relationships in terms of trade and investment between the two countries?
Thanks for having me. Well, technology has always played a huge role, even prior to the pandemic. Like now more than ever, you know, platforms like Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, people are having video calls, they're doing pitches, they're meeting with collaborators and investors. So technology is playing a huge role already and prior to that. And at our end, for example, so at Impact Ventures, essentially we co-design technology initiatives that are on a local to a European stage, but welcoming global audiences. So prior to COVID, we co-designed about 16 of our SuperConnect series events, which are kind of like innovation pitch days, exhibitions, networking events in 9 cities across the UK. They were all focused on promoting collaboration, trade, investment between UK-based startups, scale-ups, investors, SMEs, and so on. And so with physical events, it means that you can be inclusive to those that are based in those locations or willing to travel, but it doesn't enable you to welcome a global audience into the mix. So we were running events in London, Cambridge, Manchester, Bournemouth, and others. And we were still having Indian companies like Capital QA, who have an office in Milton Keynes, but their core offices in Bangalore, Hyderabad, etc. So because they had a UK subsidiary, they were able to take part and have their teams take part and so on. But some companies that weren't able to travel, we did do some limited kind of pitching, but it's very hard to use to have a physical and run kind of a hybrid event when you're just using, let's say, a Zoom type platform. So since the pandemic, we've been able to use virtual event platforms like Hopin that have enabled us to have virtual talks, exhibitions where people can put material and investors can flick through different pitch decks, kind of speed video networking, so people can have one-to-one sessions across borders. So it's enabled us to attract thousands of people in 30 plus countries, rather than hundreds of people from across the UK. So I think technology is playing a huge role, and I think a number of private and public sector organizations are recognizing, whether it's, you know, having employees work from home on a flexible basis, or whether it's running, you know, virtual events rather than physical events.
Yeah. So technology helps you become more inclusive across different parts of the country, but also across different barriers we may have had between different countries as well. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that? How might you co-design and deliver trade and investment initiatives, not just in the UK, but between India and the UK? Can you share some light on that?
Sure. So, I mean, we co-design initiatives that include conferences and summits. So let's say we do MedTech summits with the National Institute for Health Research, Surgical MedTech Cooperative. We do, at the moment, we're in the middle of a 6-week MedTech course with the University of Southampton Institute for Life Sciences, which is about improving MedTech literacy amongst SMEs. And so every initiative we do, we always are co-curating, co-designing, co-planning with private sector organizations. So whether it's Microsoft for Startups or Hayes PLC. And what that means is we're able to tap into their networks and our networks. So that's with bringing speakers in from global audiences, bringing partners from the local to global ecosystem, whether it's investment platforms like Cedars and Angel's Den that operate globally, to kind of local or regional based organizations such as the Dorset Local Enterprise Partnership, or even specialist organizations like FinTech Scotland. By doing that, we then kind of curate an audience that is wide and inclusive, but comes not just from the region in which we're operating. Let's say when we're doing a physical event, we make sure that we're trying to get people from all the different cities around and regions across the UK and Ireland and Europe. So for example, right now we've just launched the second year of our European Tech for Good competition with Hays PLC. And we've opened it up instead of just to applications from across the UK and Ireland, which we did last year. We've now opened it up to more than 30 plus countries across Europe, or companies that may be based in India, for example, but have a European subsidiary or base, and then utilizing European press at a local and regional level through to let's say AI press or fintech press, etc. And within all the initiatives that we do, so what makes our initiatives unique, unlike others, and I apologize for the background noise, is that we collect a lot of data at the point of registration from every attendee, every speaker, pitcher, exhibitor, etc. So this centers around what innovation they're interested in, what outcomes of collaboration, is it pilots, contracts, investments, acquisitions, partnerships, and so on, joint ventures even, and what business challenges they have. Do they have an investment challenge, or are they looking for international investments? Let's say from an Indian investor that can operate through the tier 1 entrepreneur and investor visas in the UK. And based on that, we manually matchmake them. And within the event and after the event, we facilitate introductions. So during the event, we have video speed networking for the virtual events. In the physical events prior to COVID, we had it so that when people turned up, they received an email and they said, hi Sujit, these are the 10 people that you need to meet. You've told us that you're interested in AI for investment and you want to speak with investors. You really need to talk with Joe Blogs at Angels Den, etc. And then we would have a canvas of everybody's faces, so people could go and find each other. And then we would have team members that would go around and facilitate warm introductions. And now with the virtual events, obviously having virtual exhibitions through Hopin or virtual speed networking over video helps to facilitate a lot of that during the event. But now after the event, and always, we've always facilitated introductions between investors and startups, between corporates looking for innovation and startups that have that, media that are looking for stories with companies that have those stories. So that's what we mean by co-designing. Yeah, a lot of our initiatives now with a virtual audience enable us to go out to I'd say on average, we probably have 20 to 30 countries, attendees in 20 to 30 countries joining us, whether they're attending, pitching, exhibiting. So I think technology has really opened that up, and the connections that we do enable us to help facilitate these partnerships between India, Europe, and UK.
You mentioned you work with some LEPs, some local enterprise partnerships, and other kind of regional bodies. I wanted to follow up on something that Nayan also touched on in terms of encouraging SMEs and LEPs and other organizations in the UK to collaborate more with India, work with Indian SMEs, invest in Indian startups. How do you feel like there is an appetite to look at India, or is it really not on? For example, you said Dorset LEP. I doubt it's necessarily the #1 thing on the Dorset LEP's to-do list to look at working with Indian SMEs. But generally, what do you feel like the appetite is like, and how can that be kind of fostered and encouraged?
Yeah, so absolutely. So we work with probably 5 councils and LEPs, like BCP Council in Dorset, Dorset LEP, Enterprise M3 LEP, Southampton City Council, and others. And really, a council's role is to promote inward investment, constantly promote inward investment, or to connect its local community. And LEPs are a great source of not just focusing on the local, which a council will, but focusing regionally and trying to help businesses to expand to their region, whether it's to open an office, whether it's to recruit, whether it's to tap in for business development purposes. And our experience of working with councils and LEPs over the last 5 years has been that India in particular, for the rich heritage and the history of the partnership between the UK and India, they're always attracting these companies, whether it is for the business development arm of, let's say, software development companies that for outsourcing, whether it's tapping into call centers, or whether it's bringing international investors from India to see the quality of the deal flow that is on offer in the UK, which can be very mature for the ecosystem, or even for giving an opportunity to Indian startups and scale-ups to come to the UK to raise their more mature investment round with smart investors that have networks that enable them to break into those industries within the UK. So I definitely think there is a very strong appetite. A few years ago, we actually worked with EICBI when I was its UK vice chairman, and we co-designed the India Tech Summit at the House of Parliament, and we had a number of SMEs and officials from these types of organisations that were attending to try to facilitate trade and try to identify opportunities. So yeah, does that answer the first part of your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to move away from investors in technology through to a B2C business and move on to Dr. Vijay Babu. You are the Poppadom King, from what I understand, and I want to talk to you about how did the British market initially react when you were trying to sell them the product? What are the challenges that you faced? Were they cultural challenges? Were they market access challenges? Were they regulatory and technical issues?
Dr. Vijay Babu, you're muted. Request you to please unmute. Dr. Vijay Babu, please unmute. The question has been addressed to you.
We have cases of instances just rely on their instinct and gut feeling during investments and business decisions. When we approach so they generally go by statistics and the business strategies of the company. Initially in 2011 and 12, when we approached a few British food businesses, we met with failures and dead ends. They very much rely on corporate level approvals. After a few failed attempts, then we thought of a different strategy. So why don't we approach Indian origin businesses? So in 2013, we got an opportunity to meet Mr. Rikin Lakhani. He's an Indian origin British businessman who is the director of Polak Snack Foods UK. Now they have merged with Europe Snacks. We met him in Mumbai, and he is there in Indian trip with his family along with kids and wife. So he taught me this secret, key secret, how to succeed UK and European business leads. When I explained him about my product quality to the excellence, he asked me how consistently you can supply the quality. So it is not the excellence in the quality or not the cheap price. It is the consistency of the quality and the transparency in business that could be achieved only by the adherence of standards and specifications. This is my first learning from the British business culture, consistency and transparency. Now, after learning this key point, after being in this business for the 8 years, and we have grown to a success of 50 crore business with one single product. Now we have around 10 and more clients in Europe and the UK. And now we have started importing technologies from UK, Europe, example, Ireland, Poland, Netherlands, France, Italy, UK, and Switzerland. From there, we have importing the technologies to improve Indian industries. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And in terms of the British public's awareness of Indian food habits, what did you do in conjunction with the partners that you work with here to improve their knowledge about this is something that they should be buying? I'm sure there will be some early adopters, but it would have been a steep challenge at the beginning introducing it into supermarkets.
Yes, definitely the prior awareness has helped us our success. British has a good taste for Indian food and culture. Do you believe chicken tikka masala is the widely considered Britain's national dish? Indian food dish and weekly curry night dinner has a large cultural significance in UK. You can name several Indian origin families made British food business brands like Patak's Foods from Patak's family, Eastern End Foods from Hora family, Polak Snack Foods from Lakhani family. With Indian culture, values and British business standards, they have made the empire of food industries. So prior awareness is already there on Indian culture and food habits. So it is a easy go for us. So there is no need to bring UK public to this awareness. But we need to learn business culture from them. And we need to emphasize on our business cultures. Once when we approached a business deal, we carried some samples of poppadoms to meet one of our prospective Indian origin British businessmen. So we left the box there of product and we started discussing general things. And suddenly his British born kids came there. They asked, what is there in the box? He said, poppadoms were there. Immediately they grabbed it and they started munching. So then I started explaining my quality and all. He said, stop. So your product is already approved for launch. Here is my kids. They took your product and they have finished it. They have taken it. So let's stop business. So this is the difference between Indian origin businessmen and UK businesses. So Indian origin businessmen mostly go by their gut feeling and instinct. But when we deal with British corporates, they go by mostly by strategies and standards and the specifications. So we have to learn how to put our traditional cultural values into their standards and specifications and portray. This is what already is there, but how to present it. That makes the difference. Now we have set up training centers. I will go with Mr. Costa. Because of this technology and COVID restriction, virtual events through MS Team and Zooms are coming up. So we have made a partnership with British BRCGS Academy UK. And now we have coming up with different training programs, irrespective of our own exports into UK as poppadoms. We are bringing those standards and specifications and training into India. And in the last 1 year, we have trained around some 200 business Indian food delegates and SMEs in understanding the UK and European standard requirements for the food safety culture and business management programs.
Wonderful. You've touched on some of this already, but if you were to give your top 2 or 3 bits of advice to other Indian businesses looking to come into the UK and expand into the UK, what would you advise them?
My advice for them to understand their standards and specifications and portray our cultures into their specifications. An example, recently I had an encounter with one of my UK clients, which I advised my Indian counterpart here. So previously my UK client was an Indian origin family owned business. So generally when he comes to India, he looks at our premises and our businesses, he understands it and he delivers the orders. But now things are becoming more corporate way of handling. And suddenly somebody called me from their office. After 10 years of business with them, suddenly today they are calling me and saying that we have to go through a particular SMETA third-party audit for your compliance to continue our business. So I said, we are already complying to it. And so many times your people came and visited this. He said, no, he looked into your system and he said, that, no, Indian region is designated as high risk in meeting the International Labour Organization's requirements. So better you go through this, then you'll be supplying to us. So that's a difference when you are doing with Indian business with UK. So we need to understand their specifications and requirements, changing requirements, European requirements and the UK requirements. And now I felt that the need to increase Indian representation through organizations and different bodies to UK and business cultural forums to emphasize the need to open up green channels and policy level agreements to ease the businesses to grow between India and the UK and the European industries.
Thank you very much. So we've got 12 minutes to the end of this session. We had one other panelist that was due to join us, Rahul, but he's unfortunately unable to make it, which is good news in a way because we get to spend more time with Nayan and Costa and Dr. Vijibabu. If you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat and I'll take them one by one. But Nayan, can I come back to you? Do you have some comments on some of the insights that Costa shared in terms of working with LEPs and others? And also maybe some reflections on how a B2C business or a B2B2C business like Dr. Vijibabu's has succeeded and scaled in the UK.
Yeah, so absolutely. In fact, I wanted to comment on the question that you asked to Costa. So, we as a business in India have spread out in over 50 cities now, in tier 2, tier 3 cities. And that has been one of the reasons for why we have been able to invest into so many startups. And we wanted to kind of similarly replicate the model in the UK. And we started going on to, outside of the Golden Triangle. So you have your London, Cambridge kind of and then so there's this triangle where, most investments are concentrated. But then you go to places like up in Edinburgh, you go to Manchester, and you go to other parts of the UK, and there are so many networks which are very vibrant, and they are doing so much regional investments. It's incredible. But when you talk to them about investing into India, no one has an idea about what's going on in India, what is the the kind of amount of business they can do in India. So we, over last 2 years have now been talking to these hundreds of angel groups, as well as all these syndicates and others to do co events with them, to explain to them the opportunity that is there in India, how the entrepreneurs as well as investors can look at India as an opportunity. What happens is that this is it's kind of a trend been going on for the last 10-20 years, is that every entrepreneur from India or from the UK, the first growth step outside their own country is to US. So everyone wants to go to US, and that is the next destination of growth as a startup. And what we are trying to get to is that, hey guys, UK and Europe could be that next major destination for you as well. So from India, you do not need to go to US straight away. UK and Europe could be that major market. So come here and grow yourself here. And similarly, a lot of UK and European startups, they also are looking always towards the West to grow into US. and we are trying to educate them that, India could be a massive market, and from India, you could grow into Southeast Asian markets. You have such a large opportunity there. But then the challenge that always everyone faces is they have no idea of what to do, where to go, who to talk to. And this is where I think, we are trying to bridge that gap by coming in as an investor, so that we are just not advising them, but we are also investing into them so that they have a proper hand holding there. But yeah, to answer your question, Pratik, I think there's a lot to be done. I myself has been talking to FCDO, to many other organizations, including your previous organizations, where there are so many people who are trying to build the whole UK-India thing, but it's very difficult to navigate. There's no one who's mapped out the whole journey. And for an entrepreneur who's also trying to run the business, who's also trying to do everything else, then to also try and navigate the entire ecosystem is a nightmare. So this is where, we are trying to kind of, build that ecosystem. We have already built it in India. We're trying to build it in the UK, and then, have a true cross-border conversation.
Yeah. And I guess for businesses from India looking abroad, they will have a look at known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So in the US, they know what they don't know because they've got friends and others in their ecosystem that have gone there. Whereas with the UK and Europe, there may be a lot of unknown unknowns. They simply don't know. Brexit may have been an area of discussion and uncertainty, and certainly, if Brexit happens, the size of the UK market being ring-fenced from 400 million people might therefore become smaller. So I think that's really interesting. These are definite ongoing conversations, and you're absolutely right that sometimes in some of the high-level political discussion between the two countries, between Westminster and New Delhi, I think the real opportunity that's in the regions, whether it's in the UK regions or whether it's in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities in India, sometimes gets missed. So I think increasing that knowledge base and changing the unknown unknowns into the known unknowns in the region, I think that's a really useful thing to do. Costa, do you want to add anything onto that?
I was gonna say, I think you made some very valid points there. I mean, the UK has what I would say pockets of excellence. A lot of initiatives are very London-centric, and there's a huge volume of London-based startups and accelerators and co-working spaces. And having run events in all these local cities, you see kind of the pockets of, let's say, health tech in Cambridge, in Leeds, but at the same time, you also see other cities, let's say, like the south, like Dorset, Southampton, that already have those types of companies there, and they're trying to welcome more, to come in other places. Fintech's obviously big in London, but it is also in Leeds, and there's different gaming clusters and so on. So I definitely think that promotion of where you can go outside of London, in particular where costs are lower, the cheaper, the more you go up north, the cheaper it is, whether it's for, office space or services, etc. But finding an ecosystem to go to where there's support available, where you can pilot the technology. So London's a great place to go and raise money, for example, but then you're burning through money just to stay there, when you can actually be in a place like sorry, you can be in a place like Brighton, which is only an hour away, or Oxford, etc., which has a strong ecosystem, and you might pilot your technologies in a small place that's with working with LEPs and councils to connect into local businesses and different experts and so on. So tapping into those places where you might get a pilot that you then do over a period of time, collect data, testimonials, etc., that then leads into a contract in that city that you then take to more cities to get a wider ranging contract. I do also agree with the point that it can at times feel one-sided. You hear a lot about the UK ecosystem, and had I not been involved in the EICBI for the past 2 or 3 years, I wouldn't have learned about the great work happening in Hyderabad, in the Karnataka area, and so on. And I think more needs to be done to promote the different expertise that exist in the different cities, towns, localities, and so on, but also what they specialize in, because there are gaps in the UK ecosystem. You know, investors will tell you they probably see a lot of you know, mobile apps, a lot of AI, but really like the emerging innovation areas like agri-tech that are coming about. They don't see a lot of that. They might see some of it in places where there is a lot of farmers, let's say, there's a lot of fields and so on. They don't see that, but particularly the initiatives that maybe a lot of these councils and LEPs will run kind of agri-tech facilities, research, R&D facilities, and they're trying to find the companies to attract from outside of their areas that may or may not exist. And actually, if they actually know and are tap into and are educated on what the pockets of excellence around the whole of India are, then they can actually fill those gaps in their investment pipelines faster, and that will improve like cultural relationships for future investments as well. So yeah, that's my points on those two areas.
Thank you. So we've got 2 minutes to the end of the session. I'll leave last words to Dr. Vijay Babu, but just before that, I think both of you make some really valid points in terms of the scale of the Indian opportunity, the scale of the Indian middle class. I think that's something you can't replicate as a startup in the UK. You have to be there. India's unique in that sense across the world to have access to that kind of scale. Equally, I think networks like this, panel discussions like this are really important to be able to learn about innovation that's happening not just in your locality, but elsewhere in Europe and other parts of India. Even Lord Hanan at the beginning mentioned Devi Shetty's hospital and the kind of systemic way that cataract operations are done there. So that kind of thing, as innovative as the NHS might be in some areas, will absolutely never happen in the UK, because you cannot have British citizens going several miles away for a specialty clinic. Every hospital has to be absolutely multi-specialty, and there's that's sacrosanct in the UK. Whereas you can have innovation in India because people understand you have to go further away. So Dr. Vijay Babu, over to you for any last comments, and then we'll close the session and hand over to Mr. Janardhan.
My comment to the last is that we need to increase Indian representations at different levels of UK and the European business cultural forums. We emphasize the need for policy level agreements to ease the upcoming compliance levels of Indian business industries and manufacturers, because it can't be done on immediate basis, but we can work on some milestones, and the channels can be released from red channels to yellow channels, then let us get into the green channels. So that way we need to increase our representation for dialogues with different organizations based in UK and Europe.
Wonderful. Thank you to all my panelists for a wonderful discussion. Thank you for taking the time and sharing your insights. And over to Mr. Janardhan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pratik. I really appreciate the way you moderated the session and led Nayan as well as Costa and Dr. Vijay Babu into the discussions. Very meaningful, insightful, and it was also trying to bring out various nuances, how business can be done in the future, and how in India, Dr. Vijay Babu especially talked about compliances. We need to be compliant with various things. There are a lot of sensitive areas in that. And when that's smoothened out, and I agree with him that, once we try to align ourselves with the British culture and the compliances there, the ease of doing business is much better. Thank you so much, the panelists, for being with us. And I'm going to open the floor for questions for just 5 minutes. You can ask questions to the panelists. The floor is open for questions. Just 5 minutes, please. Anybody wanting to ask any question to Pratik or to Nayan or to Costa or to Dr. Vijay Babu, you're welcome to ask questions. No questions? Well, I'll give you 4 more minutes. You can also type it in the chat box if you don't want to ask vocally, orally. Yes, you can type it out if you want to. Well, I think that was a wonder.
I was just going to
Yes.
say, while we're waiting for the questions to come in, right?
Yes, Nayan, go ahead. Yes.
You know, one of the other challenges that I have seen personally is also that, you know, we say about building businesses across country, cross border, but then there are a lot of other nuances around taxation and everything else, which also needs to be accounted for. So it's very, you know, easy to kind of just talk about cross border, but there are a lot of complications behind setting up businesses. So one of the things that we have realized is that, you know, when we talk about startups in India, for example, wanting to set up base in the UK, you know, there needs to be more organizations who can really help advise smaller businesses on how to structure the transaction, because if the IP is based in India, and if, you know, if the taxation is all in India, then how the investors will, you know, invest in which structures. So those kind of things, you know, the small businesses do not really understand and find it very difficult. So that's where, you know, we as a group maybe need to help out a bit more in terms of, you know, having those partners who can give those advices for, you know, these structures and everything else, so that anyone who's from the UK looking to go into India, or from India coming to UK or Europe, they have these other things in place as well.
You're right, Nayan. There are a lot of, you know, underlying currents as far as the culture is concerned, subcultures from various regions in the country, and there are sensitive issues. I didn't want to bring it up, but then I just mentioned, people don't mistake me. There is an anti-bribery law in UK, and that should be understood very clearly. And now that everything has gone online, we have tried to do it with a lot of bribery in India because everything is online. Like that, there are a lot of issues which need to be understood. It's very sensitive, so I just thought I'll touch upon that. Thanks, Nayan, for bringing in that. We need a lot more advisory bodies to give them the actual picture of how it is done, and even understanding each other, even the language for that matter, and the expressions. So wonderful. Thank you all panelists. And then since there are no questions, we will move on to the next panel discussion. And gentlemen, thank you very much. Great having you with us. So we now move on to the second panel discussion, very interesting one. Again, the topic is the same, but then it is going to be between India and the European Union. And I have great pleasure in inviting the following panelists. Ms. Valentina Manducci. Hi. And Mr. Dan Ram, CEO of IgniterPad. And Valentina Manducci is the founder of Apsaras Events. Ms. Monica Florina, founder, the Cultural Intellectual Property Rights Initiative. Ms. Chiara Lafaro, have I said that right? Lafaro, founder, yes. Society C. Lafaro, right? Welcome. And the panel discussion of all these beautiful women is going to be moderated by Vash Shenoy, and the only man going to be there
is Dan Ram. Casey, have we lost you? Or?
I think we lost him. So
there are two gentlemen out there. One is a panel speaker. One is
Dan Ram. All right.
We lost you for 5 seconds in there.
Oh, you lost me for 5 seconds. Am I audible now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So Dan Ram, the only man in the panel, and of course Vash Shenoy, the moderator. Over to the moderator, Vash Shenoy.
Well, Janardhan stole all my jokes to start off, so welcome everybody. I'd like to give a small compliment to Mr. Dattani for that very succinct tribute to Donny Rumsfeld, whom we lost recently, with the known knowns and known unknowns. And well, the big unknown in business, Europe and India, and not the UK, because you guys left us. So welcome, everybody. Let's start with the three beautiful ladies. If you could just start with briefly introducing yourselves, and then we go to Dan, of course, who gets the fourth place because we had three beautiful women before him. So Chiara, if you could start off with a brief introduction.
All right, so thank you, Vaishnoy, and good morning, everyone else who's been here. Rightfully, my name is Chiara. I am Italian, but I've spent the last 4 years in France and the previous 7 years before that in India. My connection with India nowadays is overall of about 10 years. And while I was in India, I worked in the corporate sector, supporting foreign companies, setting up and expand their business in India. Firstly, as a consultant and later on as a banker. And that's just why I believe that's why I'm here today, to share a little bit of insights that I gathered through that experience, as well as some further insights I gathered while I have been in France, where I started working up, taking up a solo enterprise and supporting companies from India to better understand the European counterpart from a cultural as well as a language point of view.
Thank you. Valentina, if you could give us a brief introduction. First of all, welcome.
Welcome. Hi, everyone. Just to specify, my surname is Manduki. Casey, sometimes people say Manducci. It's like Mandukya Upanishad, so I'm really attached to India thanks to that. So my surname is like actually a name of an Upanishad. So I am 34 and I'm the founder of Apsaras Events. I'm also Italian, so it's very happy to see another fellow Italians here. And mainly I am a dancer. I'm training in Indian classical dance, Kathak and Bollywood. Plus we do organize and provide services to international destination weddings, mainly South Asian weddings. So from mainly our clients are from the US, America, or India, or Singapore. And of course, they come here to celebrate the special days in Italy. That's it.
Monica, welcome. And if you could say a few words about yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll start by thanking you that I think it's the first panel in my life that actually mentions my second first name. My father will be so proud because it's basically the feminine version of his. So my name is Monica family name is Monica Moisin, and Florina is this second middle name that nobody uses until today. And it will be a great joy for him. I hope he saw this online. I am a lawyer by profession. I practice in the European Union. I am a member of the Bucharest Bar Association, being born and raised in Romania, and in the Berlin Bar Association, living and working in Berlin. I am the founder of the Cultural Intellectual Property Rights Initiative, as well as a cultural sustainability consulting company. And my relationship with India started around 2018, when I started this campaign called One Voice for Craft, looking to interview artisans on the ground in India, in the hope of being able to legally support the rights of artisans, custodians of craft, and finding a way to create IP tools that are focused exclusively on traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions. And our work last year, our most recent research there, we focused on the contribution, Indian contribution to the sustainability narrative. And we see that always we talk about the sustainable development goals, and we always try to align to the West, by why not looking the other way around? Because India has extreme richness in culturally embedded sustainability practices, and we just need to find the ways to communicate that to Europe and build knowledge partnerships on that purpose. And this is what I do. I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you, Monica. Welcome again. And Dan, finally, last but
All
not
right. Hey everybody, it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for this amazing opportunity. To all the other panelists, hello. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I hope we'll have a good time. So what I do is, and the reason I have a stage name, so my official name is Joe Daniel Ramamurthy, but my stage name is Dan Ram because I work across multiple borders. And Ramamurthy can be a little bit of a mouthful. For the Indian crowd, they struggle with Daniel, and for most of the rest of the world, they struggle with Ramamurthy. So Dan Ram became a little bit easier. My passion in life, my calling, my purpose is to create important dialogue specifically about how innovation can help charter a better future. And the way I do that is I host, so kind of like what Vas is doing and the others are doing, I host tech conferences across multiple verticals, whether it's the future of mobility, whether it's the future of smart cities, whether it's the future of fintech, healthcare, across the board. If you think about some of the tech conferences like South by Southwest, Web Summit, Slush, the World Economic Forum, TEDx stages, those are the areas that you'll find me hosting, interviewing, introducing. I love working with change makers, but really where I get excited, where I get fulfillment is when that inspiration trickles down to the everyday person, so that they can elevate, they can move forward in their own lives. And so that's what I do. I'm a bridge across cultures. I'm a bridge across those who have and those who have not. I'm a bridge among those who are intellectually ahead and the rest of us who can implement and execute to make that happen. So I'm really, really excited to be here and looking forward to this conversation. Also, I am Indian in India right now at this moment, but mostly I split my time between Germany, occasionally Poland, Ireland, UAE. That's where my homes are and my offices. But right now I'm in India because of the pandemic. Haven't been able to leave, but also very grateful for the amazing time with my parents. And the strange accent is because I grew up in 10 countries as the son of an Indian diplomat. So although I may sound like the least Indian in the room, I probably am the most Indian at this moment, given that I'm actually here at this moment.
Thank you so much, Dan. So let's go with Chiara first. Chiara, you've worked in corporate India for a few years. I'm assuming you were hired for a specific reason. Please do tell us something about your role and the underlying rationale.
All right. So like I mentioned in the introduction, I worked as a management consultant in India starting 2013. And after a few years, I was given a role in one of India's main commercial banks. And in both cases, we were supporting foreign companies to set up or expand their business in India. In my first job, we were doing so from a management and the strategy point of view. So while looking at the regulations and finding partners, etc. And as a banking professional, it was on the strategic and also funding point of view. But the rationale in both cases was the same. That is, the companies realized that although their foreign clientele was for a major part comfortable using English as their main language for business communication, there was always something maybe missing or something more that could have been achieved by creating a closer bond either with the customers or with the partners, etc. And this is why they decided to take up a resource like me to be able to, on one side, act as a link between both the worlds, but also at the same time to open up opportunities on both fronts. So like we had Costa just mentioned in the previous panel that sometimes if you're not aware of a certain market, you cannot be aware of what kind of opportunities are there for you. So my role was also this in a certain way, to make each party understand, okay, this is how it works here, and this is what could be done by you and on the other side as well. So that is just to summarize the role.
Okay, just a quick follow-up on that. So what were your takeaways from your India experience?
Takeaways, too many. So maybe what I can do is I can tell you a little bit how I was able to fulfill this role in the first place, and also what I can suggest and what I keep suggesting to people who ask me about India, etc. Because sometimes I've held conferences on this topic as well. So one thing is that from very early on, I was always passionate about foreign languages and understanding the culture, that was behind them. So in school, for example, I went to a language school, and there we were studying English, French, and German from a language, but also from a cultural point of view. And when I moved to India it was 2011, I did the same with Hindi. I started learning the language, and at the same time, I really made effort to understanding what's going on around me. How do people reason? What is the logic that they have? How do they operate? And I also started adopting some of these practices myself. And this is a critical step that was very important for me, and that I keep suggesting to whoever wants to address this, that you have to understand that English alone doesn't is not enough to really feel part of the local community, and at the same time to make you really a deeper element of that group. So now, talking from a job perspective, my role was this. So on one side, being knowledgeable about management related issues and India related issues when you're trying to setting up a company, but at the same time to really be fully rooted into the local practices. So to be able to, to tell people, okay, this is how things are done here, and this is how they think. And the takeaway that I would say that I've learned after a few years, and that I would like to share, is that whenever we are addressing a situation like this, is we have to keep in mind that our logic and their logic are not clashing. They are different. But if you're not able to understand why certain things operate in a certain way, is because we are not able to see what is the mechanism behind, what is the logic that's going on behind, what is the background of a certain thing. And for me, this is something that I started realizing after a few years being in India and understanding more about the background and reading more newspapers, talking with people, etc.
Thank you so much, Kara. Dan, I'll pick up from what she just said, because you mentioned that you're the son of an Indian diplomat and you grew up in 10 countries. So you're a third country kid. So what was it, growing up as a son of an Indian diplomat, and what did it teach you about multicultural relationships, etc.?
So third culture kid, TCK, that is got to be one of the greater defining labels of my life. No one on this panel is going to challenge the importance of diversity. Nobody on this panel is going to challenge the importance of stepping out of your comfort zone in order to understand, empathize, and connect with the other, whatever the other is, whether it's gender, whether it's orientation, whether it's culture, whether it's nationality, whether it's opinion. We need to do that. I think the bigger question is, how do you do it effectively? And so I think this is probably where some of the greater learnings can happen. So if I can just throw a couple of things that maybe can spark, and I don't need to flesh it out. I think we all agree on this. I'm more interested in what the others have to say on some of these thoughts than my own views on it. But for sure, I have found when it comes to living, working, and interacting in other countries, any space that is foreign to myself, asking questions rather than assuming is essential. So rather than making my own conclusions as to why a certain festival is run or why someone acts a certain way, to ask questions without prejudging their motives. That's got to be one of those. Another one has to be about entire immersion. I have found that simply living in a diplomatic or international bubble does not give me an authentic local experience, or even speaking in my own language does not help me connect with the local humor. So an immersion means the way people dress, the places they hang out, the coffee shops they go to, the food they eat. That is the only fair way to truly engage in another country. So that's the second piece I found super, super important. The third is this larger concept of adapting. I do not think that identity is singular or static. I think our own identities constantly evolve. And part of that is knowing how to adapt. So I don't ever feel, oh, because I'm Indian, I get to be Indian wherever I go. No, part of Indian is also incredibly diverse and wide. The definition of what it means to be Indian is massive. And so let me find some new areas that are true to me. And what I mean by that is when it comes to adapting, it breaks down into 3 areas: letting go of the past, engaging with the present so that you position for the future. I know if I go, so in Zimbabwe, when I lived there, we had a beautiful over 1 acre property, a swimming pool, a tennis court, a beautiful Victorian style house. Almost every middle-class family had one of those homes. But when I moved to Morocco, we lived in a 3-bedroom apartment in the city center on the 3rd or 4th floor. I could just compare and say, oh, in Zimbabwe, I had a garden, Morocco hates nature. Or, oh, wow, this is such a empty space or vacuum. But that's not fair, because there are things one learns and experiences living in an apartment that one does not get living in an independent home, and vice versa. And that's just a tiny example of the most obvious thing. I know when we first moved to Morocco, we were like, oh my gosh, this is such a downsize. But that's not fair either. So letting go of the past is important. Engaging with the present, truly appreciating, recognizing what is unique about.
Dan? I think we lost Dan.
Morocco. On the other hand, because I'm adapting and evolving, I bring all of that with me, and that actually positions me for what lies ahead. I am better suited to connect in the countries I'm in because of my past adapting and engaging. So those are just a few quick thoughts I wanted to share. I would be very curious from the others as to what their tips and tricks are to truly connecting and engaging in the other lands.
I'll go over to Monica now. Thank you, Dan. And Monica, cultural intellectual property rights and Europe and India. Why don't you tell us something about this?
Right, thank you for the question. Cultural intellectual property rights is a new terminology, obviously, and needs a little bit of explanation. We talked about, you mentioned innovation, Dan. I think very few maybe are familiar with how much innovation we can have in the field of law and how we can change basically society and the rules that we go by, the colonial rules that we were many cultures forced to live under, and a system like the IP system that is built on construction that is favoring the industrial society, is kind of eliminating the cultures of the other from a sphere of protection. So in many countries in Europe and around the world, you'll find out that craft and traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions, so all these expressions that are handcrafted, handwoven, like what I'm wearing today or what is behind me, they are called traditional cultural expressions, and in many countries they are considered to be in the public domain. So what happens often is that fashion companies, and not only, many creative industries, tend to copy these aesthetics or replicate them by digitally printing them or so on, and nothing gets to the source communities, or the rightful value of this work and the centuries of heritage and knowledge is not factored in. We live in an economy where the actual good is more valuable than the time of the human and the investment of energy that goes into it, and that's something that should raise some questions. Are we really calculating the well-being of the people, or are we just literally calculating people as economic factors? So cultural intellectual property rights are a innovative construction, a new generation of rights. This is how I designed it. We call it sui generis protection system. Basically, what we do is we advocate for a unique system of protection for traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expression, so that we create fairness and equity in business relationships, especially when creative industries, or not only the pharma industry, is appropriating resources as well. Many other industries are doing the same. In architecture, we talk about vernacular architecture. The construction business is strong, but what happens with the traditional healthy ways of building houses? And we know in India, we have so much of this trend coming back, and you have the healthiest buildings in certain villages, and so many change makers, forward thinkers who are now investing, multimillionaires who are investing in building their houses based on the old ways of doing things, combined with technology that today is spearheading. So this meeting between traditional knowledge and innovation is a sweet spot and a place for interaction, a place where we should be looking more into. And for that, we also need to have some legal framework in place. What we want to do is to be ahead of this movement of creating legislation. And this is what cultural intellectual property rights are. I hope I got a little bit of clarity on that.
Thank you so much, Monica. We'll come back to you with a follow-up question on this because it's very interesting. Valentina, what can be more cultural than a big fat Indian wedding? So, I've heard of a lot of people from Europe and the United States going to India and getting married and having destination weddings with elephants and camels and forts. Tell us something more about entertainment and destination weddings on Italy, India, and Europe in general.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Russ. Yes, we got much more fat weddings here. We got, mountains rented or entire villages. We got Shakira in Venice. So I guess Italy has been a very important destination weddings in the imaginary of Indians because a lot of actors got married here. The last one were Deepika and Ranveer Singh getting married in Villa Balbianello in Como. So I am first as an artist and secondly as organizer. So I basically help the wedding planners to get everything fit. Because as before Naina Gala said, this you get to know you have to really know the differences between each and every community. So it's important to know whether the wedding is mixed or whether it's South Indian or Gujarati, Punjabi. I think we suffered a bit in the past year because mainly all the weddings got shifted. But what I noticed is that the Indians from India or whether the European diaspora, they are really attached to the European dream, especially Italy, because come on, we are the most beautiful country around. We offer everything from the mountains, lakes. So we mainly got weddings, Tuscany or the Costiera, which is south, or the islands, Sardinia and Sicily, Puglia. For Tuscany is the main place because it's very well sold. But where I come from, actually, Chiara, where are you from exactly from Italy?
I am exactly from Sicily.
Sicily, oh. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, and then the north. So we got everything. Like Italy, sometimes I think it's just like a little India. If you think we got the mountains, the Alps, whether you got the Himalayas, then we got the islands. It's the same shape, kind of. We are a peninsula, so.
So even Washington is from Italy, is from Naples.
Yeah, I'm in Naples. So I was just about to say that, the most beautiful part of the country is in the south. So I think the Indians will slowly gravitate down south because eventually everybody gravitates down south. So I'm not very worried about Indians coming to Naples very soon and actually finding themselves at home here.
Yeah, but the thing is that with the immigration, as Chiara could also say this, we are far back, sorry for my English, from like the UK. We are not used to integrate 100%. Like, so it's a very young immigration. So for example, in my case, where I have to, spread dance, having professional who go to weddings like musicians, artists, role players, it's either I have Italians who have studied this, or it's very hard to find Indians who are dedicated also to entertainment industry because it's first, second generation here. It's not like the UK. But I've decided to stay here and invest here. Sometimes I thought like, oh, let me go to UK and there is a better academics, better jobs. But I love Italy, so I want to see a little bit more India here, and I hope to do it in the right way with this business and also with my art, which is basically dance training.
Oh, fabulous. I will come back to your classical dance later. Chiara, quick question. I know that after the corporate world, you started out on your own as a consultant. Was this in Italy or was this in India? And tell us something more about it.
Okay, so in terms of administrative compliance, it's registered in France. But then, I mean, if I'm in France, I do the jobs from France, and it happened that I did some jobs from India as well from time to time when I'm traveling. So if my clients know that I am traveling at a certain time, or if they tell me, okay, we are planning this for this time, will you be there? So then we arrange. And just to join a little bit what I had shared earlier, and how, first of all, I would like to join this part of the discussion to what Dan Ram said. I fully agreed 100% with his experience because it was mine as well, in terms of really deep diving into the culture and changing your own identity, as to not to dilute yourself, but to enrich yourself with new things that you can discover. So one of the incidents that happened to me and that I keep remembering and cherishing is one of the works that I was doing for a client. Uh, there was an Indian client from Gurgaon who had hired me to be an interpreter for a training, an internal training that was going on. So they had planned this training for 8 days, and there was the local workforce, so the trainees, and then a trainer who came from Italy. So they hired me to interpret what he was teaching. But the thing went much further, and we all, by the end of it, were left with a very positive experience. And I'll tell you what happened. So at some point around the end of this training, one of the trainees came to me and said, when this training started, we saw you, and we all had some reservations of how the program would have gone, because we saw you were foreigners, and we thought that there would be some understanding problem. We had experiences in the past where we had trainers who came here and they spoke English, so language was not a problem, but yet we had issues connecting at a deeper level with the trainer. And when we saw you, we thought that it would have been the same. But then we realized as we were dealing with you that you actually were talking to us just like you were a local person. We saw that you were able to understand our concerns and to put them across correctly to the other party, and at the same time you could relay information to us in a way that was easily understandable by us. So we did not feel that difference at all, and that was, for me, I think, the one of the best achievement in this entire process.
That's such a wonderful anecdote. Dan, you want to catch up on that remark and tell us about your offices in Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia, and your friends globally? Being somebody who's a third culture kid and then working in a cross-cultural environment must be very unique. So why don't you tell us something about that?
It may have been unique, but I don't think it's a choice anymore. I think we're all now catapulted into this working globally, working remotely. I think it's so necessary. I would struggle to think of someone that does not have family, friends, or colleagues that live in another country. And so the quicker we learn to engage with different people, different cultures, the better we all will be. I would say I might have had a leg up, a little bit of advanced practice when I was growing up because of my parents' jobs as a diplomat. But this is something you got to keep relearning all the time, because the rules of the game keep changing all the time, right? Cultures are changing so quickly. Expectations are changing so quickly. So I think this is one of the constant challenges, but also blessings. And so I would say a couple quick thoughts on working remotely. The rules differ. How I run the office in UAE is so radically different from how I run my office in Ireland. It probably is better for me to give some specific examples than making abstract statements. So, for example, I know in UAE, so let's talk about Monday morning meetings, all right? So first up in the Monday morning, we're all there, the team, my local team are there. How we run the meeting looks radically different. In India, for example, they all call me sir. Even though I keep telling them, my name is Dan, they will all call me sir, up to this day. In Ireland, I am Dan, I am mate, I am anything casual and informal. When I'm in Germany, they don't even bother addressing my name. It's just about let's get work done. So it's just like, all right, so agenda for today. You know, there's no real like addressing. And obviously, I'm making stereotypes, but these are actual anecdotes from. I mean, there's differences in even the Irish, and there's differences even among the Indian. But overall, when I'm talking about how my Monday morning meetings run, I know in UAE and India, we spend the first. It's a 30-minute meeting. We probably spend 15 to 20 minutes doing small talk. Same in Ireland. In Ireland, we talk about the weather, we talk about the weekend, we talk about personal lives. When it comes to UAE and India, we ask about family. It's very important that I ask, how's your mother, how's your father, how's your brother, how's your husband, how's your wife, how are the children, how's school? So we go through all of the social etiquette first. Then we get to business. In Germany, we start with the business, and if we have time at the end, we'll say something like, hey, so skiing this weekend, or, you know, it's like catch you, but work first, get the work done first. So I think being willing to engage differently is so crucial, right? I cannot come in saying, as a CEO, I demand this, because if I want to bring out the best in my company and among my staff, I have to be understanding and appreciating. I don't say any of what I said in a mocking tone. I say it just saying this is the uniqueness of how they are. That's just a reality of it, and I appreciate them and I recognize, and that's why I indulge in it happily, gratefully. In Ireland, I love sitting back and talking about how many sugars in the tea and coffee. It's super important. You know, oh, why are you having less sugar than last time? Everything okay? And we love that small talk. But in Germany, I won't irritate people by doing that. We'll get right into it. I'll just say, okay, so let's talk. What's the plan for this week? I'd say recognizing that every office runs differently is important. I would also say being willing to react and engage differently. In some countries, say in the US, I am more outgoing, bubbly, energetic, love to make a couple of jokes, make people feel welcome. In India, there is a little bit of a barrier between me and my staff. However much I joke and I kid with them, they like that respect of that space. And so as a result of that, I'm a little bit more reserved, a little bit more the typical, like, all right, here's what we're doing. So I just think this is important. And by the way, these rules keep changing because my team also keeps changing. My Indian group are seeing more and more of my content. I'm very active on social media. I create stories all the time. I put out videos all the time. So they're watching that and they're adapting and growing as well. And so I want to bring them to wherever they want to go to. And not to say that we also don't have an important role in challenging things, right? So just because I'm accepting of all local culture does not mean that I endorse all of it. And sometimes I think we have to challenge it. There is a very strong class system in India, very strong class system. And so when my maid comes or when the gardener comes, there is an expected way to talk to them, and there's an expected way that they talk to me. I challenge that because in many ways it does not make me feel comfortable. But I've learned the hard way that maybe I was also wrong. And even though I might have come from a good place about we treat everyone equal, I realized, oh, by the way, Vas, can you mute yourself for a second? I just hear a very long, loud hiss. There we go. Super. Thank you. You know, when I engage with the local crew here in maybe a German or American approach, it actually does not work out so well for me or for them. And so I think it's just important to know when to challenge, when to press, but also when to pull back and say, okay, that's just the way it is. I work a lot in some strict Muslim countries where there's, it would not be appropriate for me to meet even my own staff if she's female, one-on-one over a cup of coffee. It doesn't work. Yeah, it's just not supposed to do that. Even though they're my staff, even they might be my family, it's just not appropriate in those cultures for me to do that or to be seen doing that. And so I'll just say, all right, let's bring 3 or 4 people together, right? And we'll just have a group coffee. And as much as I might want to do a one-on-one coffee because I need to talk about them and audit their work, we do it as a group. And so just knowing when to push and when to pull, when to give, when to take, when to challenge, and when to go, all right, let me grow and learn as well. I think those are just important mindsets when it comes to working across cultures.
Thank you so much, Dan. Going from informality to formality, Monica, how can EU-India knowledge partnerships lead the global narrative on sustainability?
I will start by building a bit on what Dan said and just maybe showcasing how our dynamic in our team. So I work across 4 continents at the moment with Australia, Mexico, and India. And we are a very informal team. A lot of our work has to be done remotely because of the constant need for meetings and working on different concepts, developing those. And we've reached such an interesting cultural dynamic. It's really, really a sweet melting pot where we learn. We have these sessions of sharing particular or talking about particular topics that are taboos in certain cultures or things that are expected from women. Oh, I have a full women's team, not because I wanted that. It wasn't something that I targeted. It's something that happened. We're very open to have men on our team as well, but it seems to be that cultural IP is something that women want to do. Sustainability is something that they are more attracted to. And so we have these conversations and we have grown so much individually as humans as well. I think it's important to always go and look at the business etiquette. Of course, diplomacy teaches us that these rules that are culturally ingrained are extremely important and important to follow those. But it's really important for building future economies and building future societies to also look at these intersections. For example, Romania. You know, Italy is an amazing country, but Romania is also a very beautiful country. It has also it has sea, it has all kinds of different streams, it has mountains, it has everything. And what it has, and is so special to me, is that we are more connected to India than I ever thought we were. So I grew up at my great-grandparents' house, and many of the things we were doing or how the household was managed. And I got to see that connection and that kind of community feeling when I went to India. And I was not expecting that. And everybody was looking at me, at this white girl, thinking that I come really from the West, but no, Romania is in Eastern Europe and we have a totally different culture than what people may think about us probably. This concept of white privilege was so foreign to me because we've always been actually colonized ourselves, or we have been suppressed from the Ottoman Empire or the Austrian Habsburg Empire. So we were never actually conquering anyone. We were just a culture that we tried to keep our identity alive in a very special intersection in Europe. I divagated a bit with that just to basically show how connected we are as an ecosystem and how this aspect of sustaining cultures is extremely important. And then when we look at the global narrative on sustainability, we always see, and now we see this triple bottom line. We see planet, people, profit, great. People don't talk so much about culture. There is a lot of useful information in the way we do things. I call it culturally embedded sustainability practices. There's so much in the way things are done in certain countries that could be embraced and cooperated on at an international level. And I work a lot with the fashion industry, which is mainly the industry that I work in. And we talk about how to eliminate waste or how fashion, fast fashion is destroying the planet. And then you look at a sari, and yes, I wear saris because they are non-waste fabrics. There's no centimeter of fabric that is being lost in this kind of design. And there are Romanian traditional outfits as well. And you have these the kurtas, you have all this a different aesthetic that could be so beautiful if we all wanted maybe to get a little out of the Cartier suits and get into outfits that are less focused on 7 sizes of a body, but actually you can wrap yourself in in your own identity. And I think this is where we are building the narratives of including cultural sustainability, not only in fashion and when it comes to fashion, but we're talking about ways of purifying and recycling water. We are talking about how to build better spaces to live. We are talking about health management and integrating, yoga and other practices that are healthy. We're talking about Ayurvedic diets. We are talking about a lot of knowledge that is embedded in the cultures that are on this planet and through which we can develop sustainable economies. So businesses that can be built on this kind of knowledge exchange.
Thank you so much, Monica. Valentina, quick question. You've been probably involved in a business that is most affected by the pandemic because it's least, you can't really do events. You can do events online, but it's not the same thing. So tell us more about your experience during the pandemic and more importantly, what is your outlook towards the future?
Sure. So yes, our business, even though I don't consider art as really a business, like it's more of a life mission, so it can never die. It's been affected, like weddings and events. So we have to patiently wait. And regarding art, so we've been shift all the classes online, which actually you have always to see. So your glass half full instead of half empty. So actually first I was very distressed and very sad because it was like what to do, what are we doing now? But as Indian philosophy teaches us, like we should stay connected with our own soul. So this period of time make us all more thoughtful. And actually what happened in my dance is that I connected with more people, so my business got better because I was having, more online events. So we start doing shows online. We start doing classes with people that I would never been able to attend classes, the dance gurus or lectures, or, the ashram I went in India were doing stuff online. So after the initial, sad part, it starts the good part. So and now that everything slowly is opening up, we see a lot of new opportunities in terms of dance or art classes, and now events are slowly starting again. So I would say it was a gift, a very important challenge for us, because if you were not into this for passion, truly from your soul and art, you would have not been able to do it. So I guess whoever was not doing this purely and genuinely has stopped, and whoever has stayed, it's gonna be more powerful and more strong. Also, I want to say, like, this is a summit, right? Like, we are all together, and it's an important concept in dance. In Kathak, we call it sam, when in Hindustani music, like because rhythm are circular, no? In India, like the karma stuff and reincarnation. So summit comes from the word sam. And this is important, like to just go back there, no matter what.
Thank you so much for such a positive outlook on the situation. Yes, definitely glass half full, not empty. Chiara, you're doing a postgraduate on the sociology of organizations. That sounds complicated. So why don't you give us some theory to match with the practice?
All right. Yes, it might sound complicated, and especially at this time after we have been online for a few hours, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. Firstly, 2 years ago now, I came across this program and I thought it was perfectly fitting in my experience, because sociology of organizations tries to combine the teachings of sociology, but to the organization environment, be it for internal functioning as well as for external functioning. And one of the main subjects of this program, which I'm majoring in, by September, hopefully, it's called Sociology of Markets and Management, and it deals with two aspects. That is, on one side, how humans operate in the context of a group, which in this case is a culture, like we are talking about culture and trade between Europe and India, and our behavior when making transactions, which is what we can call an economic action. Now, in generic parlance, in generic mindset, these two aspects are often kept separate. That is, we think that when we are making an economic decision, this decision is based on logic and calculation. So we think about the price and, you know, we think about certain things, but this is not actually true or not fully true, because our very own calculations are based on what is acceptable or not acceptable to us or to our cultures. And this, I mean, it can happen, and it does happen, that some products which have, for example, all the right economic or financial qualities, so the right pricing or the right regulatory compliance, or just like Nayan said in the previous panel, you know, the right IP address for a certain market, etc., they might be in place, and still that product might not appeal to the target audience. So one can say, okay, why? And this is where the social considerations come into play. And on top of this, there was another point that a few hours ago, earlier today, Lord Hannan from UK made. You know, he spoke about you know, internet and trade and all this topic. And here I thought about a quote from a sociologist called Pascal Chantela, and he wrote a paper called The New Economic Sociology, where he exactly touched upon this point. He said, today, with the internet, and I would add also with the pandemic and everything moved online. But the problem is that all these exchanges are minimal, they are discontinued, and they're often impersonal. And the main point here is, how do we overcome this geographical, but also this social distance with the people that we are dealing with? It can be India, but it can be the world. So, and that's where the social considerations again come into play. So joining back what I said a few minutes ago, that we don't only calculate the price or the guarantee, etc. What we do is actually we calculate, that is, we attach also a quality tag to the product or the service that we are dealing with. And this is not me saying it's a sociological research, okay? So I'm just quoting what I've learned, but which I found very, very interesting too, because in my experience as a consultant, we used to say, okay, this is how you deal with selling certain products in India, etc. But I didn't know that there was all this actual research done on it. And when I came across this term, calculation, that is, you calculate based on the quality that you perceive, because quality itself is not, it doesn't go by itself. The quality is perceived by me, and by me as a person living in a certain cultural context. And the easiest example that we can make is packaging. Why certain packaging work in a certain environment and why they don't work in another environment. And what Monica said just a while ago was, you know, goes in the same line. She spoke about, we don't look at the artisan who has made a certain product, because we are, in our calculation, we are not used to include that particular item in the calculation or calculation list. And in our individual capacities, we should be working in the directions that we are doing, so that all this, you know, different items become a little bit more balanced, or at least they are put into public knowledge. So that's my view on this.
Thank you so much, Chiara. Very interesting. Dan, final question. Top tips on building cultural relationships.
Oh boy, you saved the hardest one for the ending. Gosh, top tips for building cultural relations. I might have started with this, so it's sometimes nice to kind of end how you begin. Ask questions, don't assume, and that's super important. Have a deep, Bas, can I ask you to mute yourself again? There's just a lot of background sound there. So, you know, making sure that you respect yourself and you respect the other. They both are valid. They both are true. They both have much to benefit from each other, not in isolation. I think that's a really important one. I think third, leaving yourself open to adapt, to evolve, to keep growing and keep changing. I think that's super important as well. I think for me, because I'm in a place of leadership, and I think everyone in this group is in a place of leadership, being responsible for cultural adaptation, I think is another thing we got to put at the mantle. I don't think it's enough to just be a good leader or to be a good boss or to be efficient. I think we are responsible for our communities to be a driving force, to enlighten, excite people about what happens when you do cross borders, when you do build across to what is foreign, what is different. I also think on a personal level, read, watch movies, engage in dance and music and art, ask questions, challenge the status quo, step out of the comfort zone. As I'm listening to my panelists, I'm thinking a lot about, all right, what have I done recently to force myself to, because I think the learning is for life, right? I don't think just because I'm on a panel today means I've figured it out. Absolutely not. And I think the more that I was listening, Monica, I love Romania, by the way, and I actually started my speaking journey in Bucharest. My first ever gig was over there, and it's such a understated country. It's so rich and so much, but who would have ever guessed that I had a Romanian story to me? And yet it has spoken so much into my life and given me so much. And that's because I stepped out of the comfort zone. There was a lovely lady in Romania. It was like, I've got some young enthusiastic founders. Can you come and coach them for 3 days? It was such a culture shock to fly across. I had to lose some of the stereotypes and what people told me of Romania and just really engage with what was there. And it was life-changing. And that's not even an exaggeration. And so I think on a daily basis, on a personal basis, we should step out of the comfort zone. We should listen to the music and the art and the Netflix shows and the podcasts of other countries, listen to other opinions. I think we'll be much richer. I think the world will be a much richer place when we do that.
Guys, I would ask one last question to all of you, if you're comfortable answering it, and probably might not have an answer, but is there more cultural sensitivity needed working with India than working with other countries? And this one, I'll start with Dan because he's in India, as he said. So let's start with Dan and then let's go through the other panelists quickly.
More, no, but I do think maybe more filters, because India is such a massive country. So there aren't other countries that, there aren't many countries that have over 1.5 billion people in it. There aren't other countries, as many countries that have been formed by multiple other nations coming together. So you have to add the filter of different cultures and nations and languages and all of that. You have to add the filter of pretty recent colonial power. And what does that do? You have to add the filter of a very ancient nation. There's a lot of filters that you got to add, but is it more complex or anything else of that sort? No, I think we have to be fair when crossing borders and engaging with other cultures, but maybe we just apply different kinds of filters in order to understand and appreciate.
Thanks, Dan. Monica, what would you say?
I think in general, it's important to look really fairly at the other and try to take down the stereotypes, the prejudgments. We're so much impressed by clothing and status. This is still happening. This is a real thing. We don't sit there and really listen deeply. We don't listen. It happens still in panels today. Like I've done so many panels this year that, even amongst ourselves, we don't really listen to what the other really has to say. We're already starting to focus on our next question. And that's the same thing about being present. And when you are there, or what I do always, and it's life-changing for me as well, then I guess India and Romania are life-changing for people who kind of get to immerse in the culture. Like Chiara was saying, cultural immersion, when I go to India, I immerse completely. And I try to lose everything I know about everything. And it has opened for me places and sources of knowledge that I never knew existed. Obviously, I had those filters in me somewhere because otherwise they couldn't have been opened. So it's about really looking at the people in front of you and trying to grasp everything, to understand the connection with nature, to understand their connection to business. Why are they worried about that? And yes, trying to discuss honestly, why are you doing this? Why is this? Because I might be interpreting it very, very differently. So I don't think there's more sensitivities. I think what is amazing as a foreigner coming to a new culture, what I would tell people who are not from India would be to just immerse and stop like getting all the misconceptions they see on TV out. And as a fact, I've been very adamant in Romania. There's this show that didn't depict an India I knew and experienced, and everyone was asking me these super insensitive, horrible questions, and I actually made a statement. I was like, you have no clue, and the fact that you are, you know, portraying a country just based on something that puts a show on, it's absolutely, I even kind of like all the, everywhere I was going and I was hearing about the show, I was like, you have to stop, this is not okay. And if I had time, I would just like write an official complaint, but I would have needed more support to do that. But literally, it's about always when you hear things that are not, and you know someone, you should always step up for them as well and say, this is not really what happens. And we have to put more focus and energy into understanding really other cultures and how they work.
Thanks, Monica. Valentina?
Yeah, nothing more to add, but yes, just I would like to import the examples of India here in Italy to be more inclusive, to be more multicultural, intercultural. And what was saying Monica, like in Italy, I don't know if Chiara know, there was a program like, not Italian Got Talent anyway, they were portraying a comic actor dressed up as Shiva, doing a very funny dance on Beyonce. So we have to put up a case. So my Italian and international dance community come together. We reached out to the TV show and they public apologize for doing this because Italy is very traditional society. We are not used much to a really, as I said, diversity. Yeah, we are like in the middle of Mediterranean. We were conquered by many people, but still we are very, this is similar to India. We are very, oh, Italians. So, but I was glad that I had a community, that I had with many people in the world, and that we could be, you know, able to point this out, like you are, you should not do that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Chiara, would you like to add something?
Well, I agree with what everyone else has said, and there are a few things that I thought in between. So one is that every time you talk to someone like this panel or people who have had the similar experiences, we all agree on, you know, how to look at a country that, okay, you don't know, like leave your judgments aside, otherwise you will never go anywhere. And to join back your question, like, does India need more attention in terms of understanding? There are two things that came to my mind. So one is that firstly, depends who is looking, who is, you know, what is your point of view? You know, what kind of cultural background you're coming from. And secondly, when I moved from India to Europe, I was not expecting to have such a cultural shock. Because I had spent the last 7 years in India, I was totally used to, you know, the way of working in India, way of dealing with other professionals in India. And when I came here, I think for a good 1.5 years, I was like, okay, wait, I'm still not able to adjust. So I think every new country that you approach yourself to needs an equal amount of considerations. And especially for an Italian, to live in France, you know, one could say, okay, that's so simple, and yet it was quite tough initially. And maybe when we look at India, we could say that, okay, maybe there are more things that you should be looking at that maybe they don't come to your mind initially. like when I am addressing France and I try to understand the local context, there are certain areas that I would be looking at. And for India, maybe there are many more that I cannot think of because I'm not part of that background. So maybe that could be a consideration to make, or like a thought that one should have in mind. But as such, I think we all agree on the same thing, and I'm glad to see that.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you all for such a wonderful panel. I had a great time. I hope you guys enjoyed yourself as well. Back to you, Janardhan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Waz. You articulated the moderation beautifully. I would say if the first panel discussion was more of brains, this was more of heart. And this panel discussion is close to my heart because I was the cultural ambassador to Britain 20 years ago. And I started teaching cross-cultural understanding. So what comes out beautifully is a lovely thread that puts everybody together. Is everybody agreed about the immersion, and then not making judgments, no premonitions. And then I think you'll have to immerse yourself with the ground realities. Dan is somebody who's had, immersed himself into various cultures. So he's very, very articulate with what happens in each place. Beautifully brought out, Dan. And I think 4 of you are now in Italy, or 3 of you. So I think the old adage that says, when you're in Rome, be a Roman, goes well. I think wherever you are, understand the local culture and try to adapt to it. And then absolutely, as I said, no animosities. Beautiful. And all of you have done a great job. If people have any questions, we will take questions from the participants and the other people if they have any specific questions. And later, I would like to have a dialogue with all of you if you wish to, and then formally close the session. Any questions, please?
Okay, so I think we're taking questions. Was needs probably leave now, so you can continue taking the questions.
Sure, we can take the questions. Anirudh Tripathi has raised the hand. Anirudh, you could ask your question.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Anirudh Tripathi. I'm from Nagpur, India. I am an academician and a student of international relations. First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists for sharing their experiences and knowledge. It was very thoughtful, enriching, and inspiring. I have a question for Monica, since she is involved in the field of IPR. Monica, could you please share your thought about how we can reconcile between free trade practices or intellectual property regime with the goals of a welfare state? Like there have been cases or instances of compulsory licensing or evergreening of patents. And these are the bone of contention between the free trade agreement between India and European Union. So can you share light on this?
I think to go into the depths of the free trade agreement between India and the European Union right now, it's beyond my expertise at the moment to respond to this question in a panel. And what I can say, I mean, that would be, it really needs a lot more. I think maybe an individual discussion would be better. But to kind of give a bit of intake, there is at the moment, obviously, a big discrepancy between what, let's say, India can protect with conventional IP tools and what the EU countries in general can protect with conventional IP tools. A lot what is being created in India still, a huge part of Indian economy falls under adequate protection with IP tools. And the fact that we have a trade agreement that talks about IP doesn't stop us to come up with tools to protect that side of the economy that is not protected by conventional IP tools. When I talk about patenting, right, there have been so many cases when also I think European patents on, for example, or attempts to patent even the turmeric. I think that, I don't know if that wasn't a US case, but anyway, at the moment, India has a traditional knowledge database So there are certain recipes, especially Ayurvedic recipes, that are in this database, and it has a defensive role, so that when patent requests are being submitted, this database is accessible to the patent offices so that they don't grant a patent for something like that. We don't have this case when it comes to all kinds of textiles. You see a lot of fake Banarsi saris being sold around the world. You see a lot of fake ikat, you see a lot of fake ajrak, you see, and this is where I talk about where IP tools are not really functioning well. The geographical indication, yes, it's strong for agricultural products, for cognac, for champagne, for all kind of foods and drinks. It does not have strong coverage on textiles. It will never have, because it's not meant for that type of products. So I think this is a systemic inequality that we're talking about in the first place. And then we can talk about a trade agreement, but a trade agreement built on a systemic inequality when it comes to IP, it is definitely something that needs more discussion. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monica, for giving clarity on that and protecting the interest of the people with their intellectual property rights. Wonderful. And we have Vijay Natarajan raising his hand for questioning. Yes, Vijay Natarajan, you could go ahead. What is your question, and to whom is your question? Yes, Vijay Natarajan, you could ask your question. Are you muted? Vijay Natarajan, you can ask. I think maybe his voice is not coming through. So Vijay Natarajan will come back if there are no more questions, or we'll take other questions, please.
I have another question.
Yes, may I know who's this?
Aniruddha Tripathi. Like
yes,
it's a follow-up with it's a follow-up for Monica only. Hello,
yes.
Monica. Thank you for the answer, first of all. And as you have already mentioned, there have been cases like turmeric patents or neem patents and things like that. Or for example, Fibonacci series have been mentioned, like attributed to that he have gained knowledge from Africa. Or for example, quote unquote, Arabic numericals. So like, can you please tell me, how do we grant recognition or intellectual property rights to these kind of traditional knowledge or products, and to the rightful owners, and who will be the rightful owner?
Yeah, very good question. So that's what we do at the Cultural Intellectual Property Rights Initiative. Come join our debates, come check our website. This is where you find how we do that, because that's what we are. We are building a system. Obviously, you cannot claim, and this historical claiming of who invented first what is always going to be like, there's a lot of politics involved. But we are now looking at realistically creating a system that is supporting, we are looking at, of course, the sustainable development goals we have in mind. We're looking at poverty alleviation, and taking cases like specific cases. If we talk about textiles, is it a fair and equitable system that Western fashion companies do not have to suffer any repercussions when they identically copy the aesthetic of design that comes from an artisan community or from a local community? Is that something that has common sense in it? No. I mean, now the discussions that are about who invented what first, that's a lot of institutions that have this role and this responsibility to promote and protect the cultural heritage of a certain country. That's a UNESCO more space, and that's not legal protection. That is another kind of a policy. So when it comes to legal protection, we also have to take into account elements of economic viability. We have to take into account, supply chains, how they work. And here we have solutions. We have a rule. We created a rule, actually, a set of best practices. It's called the 3 C's rule: consent, credit, compensation. And this rule was created not just by me inventing the rule, but it's based on existing international treaties and legal principles that are recognized around the world. So for example, the Convention on the Protection of Biodiversity and the Nagoya Protocol that talks about access, fair access and benefit sharing when someone uses natural resources. These natural resources could be, you know, like teas, for example. Assam tea is a natural resource. It's grown in that region. Communities know how it's being, so why should just, I don't know, a Lipton company be able to sell the tea? Of course, there's a contract in place, the community gets something back, they are asked for consent, and there are legal mechanisms in place. They just need to be widely spoken of, and they need to be requested by these communities. So it's time for the communities to say, we are no longer gonna give our designs to everyone and let those be copied. We want to be respected. We want our consent to be part, and we want to be involved in creating these products so that the minimum set of conditions is fulfilled. So that's the only way to start somewhere, to basically do advocacy for having a system at an international level. The World Intellectual Property Rights Organization is working for almost 40 years on 2 treaties, or maybe 1 treaty in the end, but they are still negotiating. It's 40 years still ongoing of discussion on a treaty to protect traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions. But that's obviously taking a long time because each government has a different position. And I think it has to start with practical business behavior and practices, and that will generate law, just like Facebook and Uber and all the disruptors of the industry. We have to disrupt this inequality in the IP system.